A new beginning. The morning light filtered gently through the window, casting soft beams on the wooden floor. The quiet of the room seemed to echo, filling the space with a peaceful stillness. Yet, inside my mind, the weight of the world seemed to press down on me. I sat in the old chair, looking out the window, lost in thought, but my eyes constantly wandered back to the photograph on the mantel. It was an old photo, yellowed with age, of a younger me full of hope and dreams. I was smiling, a time when life seemed full of endless possibilities. Back then, I believed that life would unfold like a perfect story, with each chapter leading to something better. But now, here I was, sitting alone, a single father, carrying the burden of raising my child on my own. I had always imagined that I would have a family, a complete one, a home filled with laughter, joy, and love. But reality had been far different. I had become a single parent, and in this quiet room, it hit me more than ever before. I was no longer part of that dream. I had become the dream itself, the hope for my child's future. I looked at my child playing quietly in the corner, their small hands clutching their favorite toy. Their innocent laughter filled the room, and for a moment I could forget the weight of my responsibilities. My child was everything to me. Their smile, their God, their presence. They were the reason I kept going. They were the reason I fought through the exhaustion, the loneliness, and the uncertainty. But even in the warmth of their presence, a question lingered in my mind. Was I doing enough? Was I giving them everything they needed? Could I, as a single parent, really raise a child to be happy, well-adjusted, and loved? The truth was, I didn't know the answer. I was doing my best, but deep down, I knew I had to do more. I had to be more than just a provider, more than just a father who was physically there. I had to connect with my child in ways that went beyond just feeding and clothing them. I had to understand them, their thoughts, their feelings, their fears. I had been so caught up in the rush of daily life, in trying to keep everything together, that I hadn't really taken the time to understand my child. It wasn't enough to just be there for them. I needed to truly be with them. I needed to hear what they had to say, to listen to their dreams, their worries, and their silent thoughts. And in doing so, I could begin to understand them in a way I hadn't before. As I sat there, lost in thought, I realized that the greatest gift I could give my child wasn't material wealth or things that could be bought. The most precious thing I could offer was something far more valuable: time. Time wasn't just about being present in the same room. It was about being present with them in mind, heart, and spirit. It was about setting aside everything else and truly listening to them, making them feel heard and understood. I knew that the days ahead would be filled with challenges. There would be moments of doubt, frustration, and fear. There would be times when I felt like giving up, when the weight of being a single parent seemed too much to bear. But I also knew that I couldn't afford to let those moments define me. I had to show up for my child every day, not just physically, but emotionally. Looking at my child, I made a promise to myself. I would give them the gift of times not just the passing hours, but the kind of time that was filled with attention, care, and love. I would listen to their stories, understand their concerns, and be the kind of father who showed up in ways that mattered. It wasn't going to be easy. There would be many times when I would doubt myself, when I would question whether I was doing enough, whether I was enough. But deep down, I knew that being present, truly present, was what mattered most. And so I decided that this would be the beginning of a new chapter in my life. a chapter where I would focus on the most important thing, my relationship with my child. Each day would bring new challenges, but it would also bring new opportunities to connect, to understand, and to grow together. I wasn't just a father, I was a partner in my child's journey, and I would be there every step of the way, not just as a provider, but as a listener, a guide, and someone who truly cared about the person my child was becoming. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to face it, to walk it with my child by my side. I didn't have all the answers, and I knew I never would. But I had time, and I was going to use it wisely. The gift of time was not something I could buy, but something I could give every day through my actions, my words, and my love. And in the end, that would be the greatest gift I could offer, the weight of responsibility. Every morning, as the sun barely crept over the horizon, I would wake up to the sounds of my child stirring in their room. The house was always quiet in the early hours, the air still with a sense of peacefulness that I rarely allowed myself to enjoy. But as soon as I heard the soft footsteps approaching my door, I knew the day had begun, and the responsibilities I had would soon weigh me down once again. There were days when I felt like I was running on empty, barely getting through the motions. Each task seemed more overwhelming than the last, from preparing breakfast to making sure my child was ready for school, from handling the endless to-do list to maintaining a semblance of order in our lives. I had become accustomed to this routine, but it was taking its toll on me. The weight of being a single parent, of carrying the world on my shoulders alone, felt almost unbearable at times. I had always prided myself on being strong, self-sufficient, and capable. But I had begun to realize that in my pursuit of providing everything for my child, I had neglected the most important part of parenting, emotional connection. I had spent so much time focusing on the logistics of life, on making sure we had everything we needed, that I hadn't taken the time to truly understand my child, to listen, to share, and to be fully present with them in the way they deserved. My child had grown older, and with that came a new set of challenges. The questions they asked became more complex, their emotions deeper, and yet I felt as though I was still trying to catch up, still unsure of how to handle the changes they were going through. There were moments when I found myself lost, unsure of how to guide them through the ups and downs of life. I was constantly second-guessing myself, wondering if I was doing enough, if I was providing the right kind of support. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day, I found myself sitting in the living room, watching my child play quietly on the floor. They looked up at me, their face filled with innocence and curiosity. "Dad," they asked, "do you ever get sad?" The question caught me off guard, and for a moment I didn't know how to respond. I had spent so much time trying to be the strong, dependable parent that I hadn't stopped to reflect on my own feelings. I realized then that my child was beginning to understand the world around them in a way that required me to open up, to be vulnerable with them. It was in that moment that I recognized the importance of emotional transparency. I wasn't just their provider or protector, I was also their guide, their mentor, and someone who needed to model what it meant to be human, to be real, to have feelings, and to show them that it was okay to experience both the highs and lows of life. So I sat with my mail, and for the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to speak honestly about my emotions. I shared how I sometimes felt overwhelmed, how I missed the presence of a partner to help share the load. I told them that it was okay to feel sad sometimes, and that feelings, no matter how difficult, were a part of life. In that moment, I saw a shift. I saw the way my child looked at me with understanding, with compassion. It was as though, by being open with them, I had given them permission to express their own feelings as well. And in that shared vulnerability, we both grew stronger. But even with that connection, the weight of responsibility still hung over me. The pressure of being everything my child needed, the protector, the provider, the confidant, and the role model, was overwhelming. There were days when I felt like I was barely keeping it all together. The responsibility of being a single parent was heavy, but it was also a responsibility I had chosen. I had made the decision to raise my child, and with that came the commitment to their well-being, to their growth and happiness. I couldn't allow myself to falter, no matter how hard it got, because in the end, the most important thing I could give my child was not just food, shelter, or material things, but the gift of my time, my love, and my presence. And so every day I found a new reason to keep going, even when the weight felt too much to bear. I found strength in the small moments, in the laughter we shared, in the quiet conversations before bed, in the way my child looked at me with eyes full of trust and love. Those moments were my reminder that, despite the challenges, I was making a difference. I was showing up. And that, in itself, was enough. Learning to listen, there's a saying that goes, you listen to understand, not to respond. It wasn't until recently that I truly understood the meaning of that. For years, I thought I was listening to my child. I thought that simply being there, hearing their words, and offering advice was enough. But I soon realized that I had been missing the most important part, the act of truly listening. One afternoon, I was sitting in the living room, lost in my thoughts about the endless list of things I needed to do. My child was playing in the corner, building a tower out of blocks. I looked up for a moment, noticing how quiet they were. Then out of nowhere, my child spoke. "Dad, do you ever feel like no one really listens to you?" The question hit me like a wave. I froze for a second, unsure of how to respond. I had always been the one offering advice, the one doing the listening, but I had never truly stopped to think about how my child might feel, how they might feel unheard, overlooked, or misunderstood. I put down the book I had been reading and turned to face them, giving them my full attention. "What do you mean?" I asked gently, my voice softening. My child hesitated, looking down at the floor for a moment. "Sometimes I talk to you and I feel like you're not really listening, like you're busy with something else or thinking about something else. I just want you to hear me, to really hear me." The weight of those words sank deep into my chest. I had always prided myself on being a good parent, on being there for my child. But in that moment, I realized I had been failing them in a way I hadn't even noticed. I had been listening, yes, but I hadn't been hearing them. I hadn't been fully present. I thought back to all the times I'd brushed off their little stories, distracted by work, tiredness, or the constant pressure of life. I thought about how often I would nod along and offer a quick solution, when what they really needed was for me to just listen, to let them talk, to validate their feelings, to show them that their words mattered. "I'm sorry," I said quietly, my voice thick with emotion. "I didn't realize that I wasn't truly listening to you. You deserve more than that." My child's face softened, and for the first time in a long time, I saw a sense of relief in their eyes. "It's okay, Dad. I just want you to understand." From that moment on, I made a vow to myself. I would listen more, not just with my ears, but with my heart. I would stop whatever I was doing, turn off the distractions, and focus on the words they were saying. and on the feelings they weren't saying. I would learn to be present, really present, in every conversation, big or small. I realized that the most important thing a parent can give their child isn't just guidance or protection, it's time. Time to be heard, time to share, time to truly connect. As I spent more time listening, I began to notice subtle changes in the way my child interacted with me. They began to open up more, to share their thoughts and emotions freely. And I realized that through the simple act of listening, I had started to build a deeper connection with my child. There were no grand gestures, no elaborate promises, just the quiet, everyday moments where I sat down with them and gave them my undivided attention. In those moments, I saw my child not just as my responsibility, but as a person with their own dreams, fears, and desires. And in listening, I was finally able to understand them. But listening wasn't just about hearing the words they spoke. It was about understanding the spaces between those words, the emotions they couldn't articulate, the worries they hadn't yet figured out how to express. It was about paying attention to the silence as much as to the conversation. The more I listened, the more I realized that communication wasn't just about talking, it was about sharing a moment of mutual understanding. As the days passed, I found myself reflecting more on the importance of listening in all aspects of life. It wasn't just something to practice with my child. It was something I needed to carry into every relationship, every moment of my day. By listening more closely, I could not only better understand my child, but also understand myself. It opened the door to a deeper, more authentic connection with the people around me and with the world. There were still moments of doubt, of course. There were days when I felt like I wasn't doing enough or that I was falling short. But as I continued to listen and connect with my child, I felt a growing sense of peace within myself. I didn't have all the answers, but I was there. I was present, and that in itself was enough. Building a relationship. As the days passed, I found myself reflecting more and more on what it truly meant to be a father, not just a provider, but someone who could genuinely connect with his child. It became clear to me that building a relationship with my child wasn't going to happen by just being physically present. It required something deeper, something more meaningful. It required time, attention, and most importantly, understanding. I had spent years thinking that simply being around was enough, that being there when they needed me or providing for them was all that mattered. But I was beginning to realize that my child needed more than just a roof over their head. They needed a relationship with me that went beyond the surface, beyond the routines of everyday life. One evening after we had finished dinner, I decided to try something different. I didn't rush off to the kitchen to clean up or turn on the TV for background noise. I simply sat across from my child at the table, looked into their eyes and asked, "How was your day? What happened today that made you smile?" It was a simple question, but as soon as I asked it, I saw my child's face light up. They started talking not just about the events of their day, but about the little things that mattered to them. A friend who had been kind, a teacher who had listened, the way they felt during a sports practice. It was in these moments, these small conversations, that I began to realize the depth of the relationship I had with my child. I had always thought that the big moments, the milestones, were the ones that defined our relationship: birthdays, school graduations, holidays. But it was in the quiet moments, in the everyday exchanges, that we truly connected. It wasn't the grand gestures that built our bond. It was the small, consistent acts of sharing, of listening, of being present. As I listened to my child talk, I realized how much I had missed by not engaging in these conversations sooner. I had been so focused on the big picture, on making sure that my child had everything they needed, on providing financially and materially, that I had overlooked the most important part of parenting, building a relationship with them. The more we talked, the more I saw how much my child longed for connection, for someone who could truly understand them. They didn't need more things, more toys, or more distractions. They needed me, not just as a father, but as a person who could relate to them, share their joys and struggles, and offer a safe space for them to be themselves. I realized that being a good parent wasn't just about managing the logistics of life. It was about being there for my child emotionally, mentally, and physically. It was about being open and vulnerable with them, showing them that it was okay to have feelings, to make mistakes, and to learn from those experiences. Over time, I started to see the effects of these small changes. My child became more open with me, more willing to share their thoughts and feelings. They stopped bottling things up and began expressing themselves more freely. And I could see the trust growing between us, building a foundation that would carry us through the ups and downs of life. But even as we grew closer, there were still challenges. There were times when I would slip back into old habits, when I would get caught up in the stress of daily life and forget to give my child the attention they deserved. There were times when I would fall short, when I wouldn't have the answers, or when I would be too tired to engage. But I also realized that those moments didn't define our relationship. What mattered was the effort I put into showing up every day, into being present for my child, even when it was hard. What mattered was that we continued to grow together, learning from each other, understanding one another on a deeper level. I learned that building a relationship with my child wasn't just about teaching them what I knew. It was about learning from them as well, about being flexible, patient, and open to change. It was about creating an environment where both of us could learn and grow, where mistakes were allowed, but love was always present. As I looked at my child, I saw not just my own reflections, but someone who was becoming their own person with their own thoughts, dreams, and feelings. And I realized that my role as a parent wasn't to mold them into what I thought they should be, but to guide them, to support them, and to help them become the person they were meant to be. In the end, it wasn't about being the perfect parent. It was about being the best parent I could be with all my flaws, my mistakes, and my imperfections. And that, I believed, was enough. The gift of time. As the days went by, I began to realize that the greatest gift I could give my child wasn't something material, something that could be bought. The most valuable thing I could offer them was something far more precious: my time. The more I reflected on it, the more I understood that time wasn't just about being physically present. It was about giving all of myself, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, to the moments I shared with my child. Time was the one thing I could never get back. Every moment that passed was gone forever, and I couldn't afford to waste it. I had spent too much of my life rushing through the days, caught up in the demands of work, responsibilities, and the everyday grind. But when I looked at my child, I knew that the only thing that truly mattered was the time I spent with them. I started to prioritize our moments together. The days I once spent running around, checking off to-do lists, were now filled with more intentional time, whether it was playing a game, going for a walk, or just sitting and talking about the little things. I started to realize how much these small moments truly mattered. These were the moments that would shape our relationship, that would define how my child would remember their childhood. There were still times when I felt overwhelmed, when I was exhausted from balancing work and parenting, when I struggled to find the energy to keep up. But I pushed through because I knew that this time, this very moment, was irreplaceable. My child wasn't going to stay young forever, and I didn't want to miss out on their growth, on their journey. It wasn't just about creating memories. It was about being present in each one. I learned to turn off my phone, to silence the distractions, and to truly focus on my child in that moment. I realized that my presence, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally, was the gift I could give them. My time and attention were the most valuable things I could offer. I remember one particular day when my child and I were sitting in the park, watching the world go by. It was one of those quiet afternoons where time seemed to slow down. My child turned to me and asked, "Dad, why do you always take time to talk to me now?" I paused for a moment, thinking about how far we'd come. I realized then that the simple act of spending time together had become a natural part of our lives. I didn't have to force myself to spend time with them. It was something I wanted to do, and that in itself was a reflection of how much I had grown as a parent. "Because you're important to me," I said softly, "and time is the one thing I want to give you, more than anything else." My child smiled, a small, knowing smile. They didn't need grand gestures or elaborate gifts. They just needed me. And in that moment, I knew I was doing the right thing. As I continued to spend more time with my child, I began to notice the changes in both of us. We were more connected than ever before. We talked about everything, our hopes, our dreams, our fears. And for the first time, I truly understood my child, not just as a parent, but as a person. I saw their strengths and weaknesses, their desires and frustrations. I saw the world through their eyes, and it opened up a new dimension of our relationship. But more than anything, I began to see myself differently. I realized that by investing time in my child, I was also investing in myself. I was becoming a better father, not because I was perfect, but because I was learning to be present, to listen, and to understand. The time I gave wasn't just for them, it was for me too. It was a gift that kept giving, creating a bond that was stronger than any material possession. There were still struggles ahead, moments when I felt like I wasn't enough, when I doubted myself, when I was unsure if I was doing the right thing. But I understood now that those doubts didn't define me. What mattered was that I kept showing up, that I kept giving my time, my heart, and my attention to my child. The gift of time wasn't just a one-time thing. It was a continuous, daily act of love and dedication. It wasn't always easy, but it was always worth it. Because in the end, time was the one thing I could give that would last. The one thing that would always remain, even when everything else faded away. The bonds that last. As the days turned into weeks and weeks into months, I began to see the fruits of the time I had dedicated to my child. The bond between us grew deeper, stronger, and more genuine. We no longer just passed time together. We created moments that meant something, moments that would last a lifetime. There were times, though, when I still felt uncertain. The weight of responsibility was always there, lingering in the background. As much as I wanted to be everything for my child, the protector, the teacher, the role model, I still sometimes felt like I was falling short. There were days when I questioned whether I was doing enough, But each time I looked at my child, I realized that what mattered most was not the perfection of the moments, but the intention behind them. The connection we shared wasn't built in a day, nor was it built on grand gestures. It was built on the everyday acts of being present, of being there when they needed someone to listen, when they needed advice, or simply when they needed comfort. It was in the little things, sitting together at the dinner table, asking about their day, showing interest in their world, and most importantly, listening without judgment. One evening after we finished dinner, we sat together in the living room, the soft glow of the lamp casting a warm light over the room. My child looked up at me, eyes full of questions, and said, "Dad, do you think I'm a good kid?" The question took me by surprise, and for a moment I didn't know what to say. Of course, I thought my child was a good kid, but I realized that the question wasn't just about their behavior. It was about how they saw themselves, how they felt in their own skin. I took a deep breath, searching for the right words. "I think you're a wonderful kid," I said softly. "Not because you always do the right thing, but because you're kind, you care about others, and you always try your best. Being a good person isn't about being perfect. It's about how you treat others, how you learn from your mistakes, and how you love." My child smiled, the weight of their worries seeming to lift just a little. I realized that in that moment, I wasn't just offering reassurance. I was reinforcing the bond we had built, the bond of trust, love, and understanding. In the days that followed, I began to see how important these small moments were, not just for my child, but for me as well. Every time we had a conversation, every time I truly listened and understood, I was strengthening our relationship. I could see it in the way my child opened up more, in the way they became more confident, more self-assured. But it wasn't just about talking. It was about being there, physically present, emotionally available, and open. There were times when we didn't speak a word, but simply sat together, watching the world go by. In those moments, I felt the connection between us deepen in ways words couldn't express. I also began to realize that this bond wasn't one-sided. My child, though young, had an incredible ability to connect with me in ways I had never expected. They knew when I needed comfort, when I needed encouragement, and when I just needed someone to be there for me. They had become my partner in this journey in ways I had never anticipated. One day when I was feeling particularly overwhelmed, my child came up to me and hugged me tightly. "It's okay, Dad," they said. "You're doing your best, and I'm proud of you." Those words, simple yet profound, were a reminder that the bond we shared wasn't just about what I was doing for them, but about what we were doing for each other. We were growing together, learning from one another, and sharing in this journey of life. As the years went on, I began to understand that the true gift of time wasn't just about giving my child material things or fulfilling their every need. It was about being present, about sharing the journey of life together, and about creating a foundation of love, trust, and understanding that would last through the years. The bond I had with my child wasn't something that could be broken by distance, time, or circumstance. It was built on moments shared, on conversations, on the small gestures that showed how much we cared for one another. It was a bond that would endure even as my child grew older and moved into different stages of life. Looking back, I realized that the greatest lesson I had learned was not just about parenting, but about relationships in general. It wasn't about being perfect, about having all the answers, or about always getting things right. It was about being present, about being there for the people you love, and about building something real, something lasting. The journey continues. As the years passed, I began to notice the changes in both myself and my child. What had started as small, everyday moments of connection had evolved into something mapper, something more profound. Our relationship was no longer just about me being a parent and my child being a child. We had grown together, learning from one another, and the bond between us had become something truly special. There were times when I found myself reflecting on the journey we had taken together. From the early days of uncertainty, when I wasn't sure if I was doing the right thing, to this moment when I could look at my child and see a person full of potential, kindness, and wisdom. It was as if time itself had sculpted our relationship into something that could withstand the challenges of life. I no longer saw my child as someone I had to protect and control. Instead, I saw them as someone I could support and guide, but also someone who could teach me just as much as I could teach them. They were growing into their own person, and with each passing day, I could see their individuality taking shape. It filled me with pride, but also with a sense of bittersweetness. My child was becoming independent, and while that was exactly what I wanted for them, it was hard to let go of the little one who once relied so completely on me. I realized that the more my child grew, the more I needed to shift my role as a parent. I couldn't keep holding on to the past, to the days when my child was small and I could shield him from everything. They were becoming more capable of navigating the world on their own, and I had to trust that I had done enough to prepare them for what lay ahead. My role was no longer just about providing. It was about supporting their independence and allowing them to make their own choices. But even as my child became more independent, there were still moments when we came together, when we found comfort in each other's presence. Whether it was a shared laugh over a silly joke, a quiet conversation before bed, or a moment of support during a difficult time, we had created a foundation that would last a lifetime. It was in these small, seemingly insignificant moments that the strength of our bond was most evident. And yet, I couldn't help but feel a little afraid, afraid that as my child grew older, they might drift away from me, that the bond we had worked so hard to build might weaken. But I quickly realized that this fear, while natural, was unfounded. The time we had spent together, the time we had invested in each other, had created a bond that was too strong to break. It wasn't about how much time we spent together. It was about the quality of that time, the depth of the connection we shared. There were times when I would sit with my child, reflecting on our journey, and I would feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the lessons learned, for the growth we had both experienced, and for the gift of time itself. I realized that the gift of time wasn't just about spending time with my child in the present. It was about the lasting impact that time had on both of us, the way it shaped our relationship, the way it allowed us to grow and change together. As my child continued to grow, I knew there would be new challenges. There would be times when we would disagree, when we would struggle to understand each other. But I also knew that we had built a strong enough foundation to weather those challenges. We had learned to communicate openly, to listen to each other, and to give each other the space to grow. I had learned too that my child wasn't just a recipient of my love and care. They were a partner in this journey, just as much as I was. They had taught me how to be a better listener, how to be more patient, and how to appreciate the small moments in life. And I knew that no matter where life took us, We would always have each other, a connection built on time, understanding, and mutual respect. The journey didn't end here. In many ways, it was just beginning. As my child stepped into new phases of life, I would continue to support them, to guide them, and to love them unconditionally. But I also knew that they would continue to teach me, just as they had in the past. We were both on a journey, and it would be a journey that never truly ended. As I looked at my child, now older and more mature, I realized that the true gift of time was not just about what I could give to them. It was about what we had given to each other. The time we had spent together had shaped us both, had made us who we were today, and that gift would last forever. The power of presence over time. I began to understand that the most important thing I could give my child was not just my time, but my presence. It wasn't enough to simply be there physically. I had to be there mentally and emotionally. I had to be present in every conversation, in every moment we shared, not just as a father, but as someone who truly cared about what was happening in their life. At first, I didn't realize how much of myself I'd been holding back. I was so caught up in trying to provide, in trying to fix everything, that I had forgotten the true power of just being with my child, of simply being there for them without trying to solve all their problems. I thought I had to have all the answers, but the truth was I didn't, and it was okay. One evening after a long day, we sat on the couch together. My child was scrolling through their phone, and I could feel the distance between us, the quiet tension in the air. For a moment, I was tempted to retreat into my own thoughts, to busy myself with something else. But I realized that this was the moment to reconnect, to show my child that I was fully present, not distracted by the world around me. So I put down my phone, turned off the TV, and simply sat next to my child. I didn't say anything at first, but after a few moments, my child looked up at me, eyes wide with surprise. "Dad, you're really here, aren't you?" they asked softly. "I'm here," I replied, my voice calm. "Really here, not just with my body, but with my heart and mind. I'm here with you, and that's what matters." And in that moment, something shifted. It wasn't a grand gesture. It wasn't a dramatic declaration. It was just the simple act of being present, of showing my child that despite everything else going on in my life, they were the most important thing to me. We didn't need to talk about anything important or even anything at all. Sometimes just sitting together, sharing the silence was enough. My presence alone was a gift, a reminder to my child that they weren't alone, that they had someone who would always be there, no matter what. As the days passed, I found that these moments became more frequent. I made a conscious effort to put aside distractions and focus on my child, not just when they needed advice, but when they needed me to be there. We shared more moments of quiet together, more conversations without rush, without the pressure of time. I started to see how my presence affected my child. There were times when they would open up to me in ways they hadn't before. Small, casual conversations would suddenly become deeper, more meaningful. I learned about their hopes, their fears, and their dreams, things they had never shared with me before. It wasn't that they hadn't trusted me. It was that they hadn't felt I was fully there to listen. I realized that when we were truly present with each other, we both felt a sense of belonging, a connection that went beyond words. It was about creating an environment where my child felt safe enough to express themselves, knowing that I was there, not just to listen, but to understand. But being present didn't just benefit my child, It benefited me as well. It forced me to slow down, to step out of the constant rush of life, and to focus on the moments that truly mattered. I stopped worrying about everything I couldn't control and started appreciating what I could. The present moment, the time we had right now, became the most valuable thing in my life. In the stillness of those moments, I realized that the real gift I could give my child wasn't just my time or my advice. It was the gift of being fully present, of showing them that no matter how busy life became, I would always make time for them. I would always be there, listening, understanding, and loving them. It wasn't about the big moments. It was about the small ones. The quiet afternoons spent together, the hugs, the shared laughter, the way we could sit in silence and still feel completely connected. Those were the moments that mattered. Those were the moments that would last. As my child grew older, I knew there would be times when we would be pulled in different directions. They would become more independent, and I would have to learn how to let go, how to give them space to grow. But I also knew that the foundation we had built, a foundation of trust, understanding, and most importantly, presence, would remain strong. The power of presence was a gift that would last a lifetime. It was a gift that could never be taken away, a bond that would endure no matter where life took us. And I knew that as long as we continued to be present for each other, we would always have the connection we needed to face whatever challenges lay ahead, learning to let go. The journey of parenting is filled with moments of joy, connection, and growth. But it's also filled with moments of uncertainty, self-doubt, and the inevitable challenge of letting go. As my child grew older, I realized that my role as a parent was changing. It wasn't just about taking care of them anymore. It was about preparing them for the world, guiding them to become the person they were meant to be. But letting go wasn't easy. As a father, I had spent so much time trying to protect and guide my child, trying to ensure that they had everything they needed to succeed. And now I was faced with the reality that it was time for them to make their own decisions, to step out into the world and learn on their own. There were days when I felt overwhelmed by the shift. How could I let go of my child when I had spent so many years holding on so tightly? The fear of them facing the world without me by their side was overwhelming. I wanted to protect them from everything, from pain, from disappointment, from the mistakes I had made in my own life. But I knew that the only way for my child to truly grow was to let them go. It wasn't just about giving them space. It was about trusting them, trusting that they had learned the lessons I had tried to teach them, that they had the strength to navigate the challenges they would face, trusting that no matter what happened, I had equipped them with the tools to find their way. One evening as we sat together, I noticed my child's eyes looking at me differently. There was a sense of independence in their gaze, a realization that they were beginning to see the world for themselves. And in that moment, I felt a mixture of pride and sadness. "Dad," my child said softly, "I think I'm ready to make my own decisions now. I want to try things on my own." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. I knew it was coming, but hearing them spoken out loud was something else. I nodded, my heart heavy. "I'm proud of you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "But remember, you don't have to do everything alone. I'll always be here if you need me." And in that moment, I understood. Letting go didn't mean abandoning my child. It didn't mean I wasn't still there for them. It meant giving them the freedom to explore, to make mistakes, and to find their own way. It meant trusting them to navigate the world on their own terms, knowing that the foundation we had built together would always be there. As the days went on, I began to see my child taking more steps toward independence. They made their own decisions, pursued their own interests, and began to carve out their own path. It wasn't always easy to watch. There were times when I wanted to step in to offer advice or guidance, but I knew that this was their journey, not mine. I had to remind myself that letting go didn't mean losing them. It meant that I was giving them the gift of independence, of self-discovery, and of the ability to create their own future. It was a difficult lesson to learn, but it was one that I had to accept. There were moments when I felt a pang of loss, when I realized that my child was no longer the little one who depended on me for everything. But there were also moments of pride, moments when I saw my child becoming more confident, more capable, and more in control of their own life. And I knew deep down that I had done my part. I had given them the tools they needed to navigate the world. Now it was their turn to use them. Letting go didn't mean that our bond was any weaker. In fact, it made our relationship stronger. I realized that by giving my child a space to grow, I was showing them that I believed in them. I was giving them the gift of freedom, the freedom to explore, to make mistakes, and to learn. And in doing so, I was allowing our relationship to evolve into something new, something even more meaningful. As time went on, I found that I was learning just as much from my child as they were from me. They were teaching me how to let go, how to trust, and how to be okay with the fact that sometimes letting go is the most loving thing you can do. I had always thought that my job as a parent was to hold on tight, to protect, to guide. But I had learned that sometimes the most loving thing I could do was to give them the space they needed to find their own way. In the end, I realized that letting go wasn't about losing my child. It was about giving them the tools to become the person they were meant to be. It was about trusting them to make their own decisions, to carve out their own path, and to face the world on their own terms. And as I watched my child grow and change, I knew that our bond would always remain, a bond built on love, trust, and the shared gift of time. The legacy of love. The years have passed, and the days of raising my child are now a distant memory. I often find myself reflecting on how much we've both grown, not just in age, but in wisdom, in understanding, and in love. Time, in all its fleeting moments, has a way of shaping who we are. And looking back, I realized that the most important gift I could have ever given my child was not a material possession, not advice, not achievements, but something far simpler and far more enduring: my love. Now, as my child embarks on their own journey, I can see the person they have become: strong, compassionate, independent, and capable of facing the world. They carry within them the lessons I've taught, but more importantly, they carry the love and time we've shared. And that love, I know, will be the foundation for everything they do. I've come to understand that love is not just something you feel, it's something you give. And when you give your time, your attention, your presence, you are building something far greater than the sum of its parts. The bond that we share, forged through years of highs and lows, laughter and tears, is not just the result of time spent together. It is the result of love that never wavered, love that persevered even when things were difficult, love that was unconditional and unwavering. Looking at my child now, I can see so much of myself in them, but I can also see something new, something I had never imagined. They have become their own person, someone capable of making their own decisions, of living their own life, and of sharing their own love with the world. And I couldn't be prouder. There were days when I felt like I was failing, when I questioned whether I was doing enough. But now, as I see my child stepping into adulthood, I realize that the love we shared, the time we spent together, was enough. It was everything. I remember the first time my child said to me, "Dad, I'm so glad you were there. You made me feel safe, loved, and understood." Those words meant more to me than anything else, because in the end, that's all we can really hope for as parents, to make our children feel loved, to make them feel understood, to show them that no matter what happens, they have a foundation of love and support to fall back on. The legacy I leave for my child is not one of riches or fame, but one of love. Love that has shaped who they are. Love that will guide them in the years to come. I may not have all the answers, and I may not have been the perfect parent, but I gave them the one thing I could, my time and my love. And that, I know, will last forever. As I sit back now reflecting on the journey, I realize that the time we shared together was not just a gift for my child, but a gift for myself as well. Through the act of giving, I receive so much more in return. The joy of watching my child grow, the pride of seeing them become their own person, the deep connection we forged. These are the things that matter, the things that will last long after time has passed. The gift of time is not measured in years or minutes, but in moments. Moments that are shared, that are cherished, and that are filled with love. And as my child moves forward, as they create their own life, I know that this gift will stay with them as it will stay with me. There will be more chapters in their life, more milestones, more triumphs and challenges, but I will always carry with me the memory of these years, the years I spent with my child, the years we shared, the love we built together. And I will carry the belief that the greatest legacy we can leave is not in what we do for our children, but in how we love them. The journey doesn't end here. In many ways, it's only just beginning for both of us. But as long as we continue to give each other the gift of time, the gift of love, we will always have everything we need.